What we have in the Republican period, towards the end, the late Republican period, is a real breakdown in the system of the constitutional government. And more, it's less about the authority of the Senate and the people of Rome, and more, it's the dependency upon individual generals who have a tighter grip on the control of the workings of the city and the people. And we have Marius and Sulla and Pompey and finally Julius Caesar. And with the actions of Julius Caesar in particular, you have an individual that's leaving a real imprint, not just on the government, but on the city of Rome itself. The 2nd century BC is a real watershed moment for the Romans. You have the destruction of Carthage, you've got the destruction of Corinth over in the Greek East, and at this point Rome securely has an empire. Well, what happens in the city of Rome is no less amazing. The 2nd century BC sees the creation of new architectural forms. In the Roman Forum, it's going to be the basilica, the covered halls for tribunals. These are courthouses, and they ultimately will lead to the later construction of the basilical churches, which use this secular structure as its architectural model. The other great construction in the city of Rome at this time in the 2nd century BC is the portico, and these are simply colonnades, usually 2 rows of them, going around and forming a square. They're roofed over, providing shelter from the sun, from rain, and ultimately you can rent out spaces or have shops and so on. But they're going to be around on 4 sides, a central structure, like a temple. And that temple then now has a real buffer zone from the rest of all the craziness of the city of Rome. And people can gather, have sacrifices, go to libraries, and whatnot. You have the first triumphal arch in the 2nd century BC. You have the new porticos and emporium spaces by the Aventine Hill. You have the first stone bridge, the Pons Aemilius, the first paved street in the city of Rome. So whereas in the 4th century BC you have the Via Appia and you have the first aqueduct, now you've got the paved streets in the city of Rome, the first marble temples in the city of Rome, and 2 new aqueducts that are going to be paid for with the destruction, the annihilation of Carthage. So rapidly then, the historical background is that with the destruction of Carthage, with the destruction of Corinth, Rome really has a grip on the Mediterranean. And what you're going to see then is a lot of internal strife and a lot of issues with the masses that are now flocking to Rome in the 2nd century BC. Hence the need to accommodate more people, more aqueducts, more building materials. You need to reform what the people have and feed the people so that there isn't the risk of famine and starvation. And you have the rise of the individual, the great states like the Gracchi that pass a lot of land reform. And it doesn't always go well. There's a lot of bloodshed. There's a lot of arguing. And the Gracchi are also both brothers, Tiberius and Gaius, killed as they're pushing forward in their legislation. In the military, we see major reforms, and some that looms large, although maybe not in the archaeological record, is Marius, consul 6 times, and the one who really does reform the military, finally eradicating the property requirement for the Roman soldier. He also changes the military tactics, and he's successful in many parts of the Roman Empire, in North Africa and against the Germanic tribes. He is succeeded by another great general, Sulla. Sulla is the first Roman general to march on Rome and take over the city. He continues to conquer in the east. He continues to build in the city as well. Marius and Sulla both loom large in the history of Rome, but like Marius, Sulla hasn't left much behind for us to look at in the archaeological record. His henchman Catulus is credited with rebuilding the temple of Jupiter Optimus Maximus after it was destroyed in a fire. The great Sullan victory, in which he was the dictator who then killed off his competitors and his foes, retires and dies in his bed, does not lead to continual peace. Instead, he's succeeded by another great Roman general, Pompey. And it's Pompey who really starts to gather power for himself with a long-term view, defeating Asia, defeating Spartacus' revolt, defeating all of his foes. That starts to really impact on the city of Rome. His theater complex is monumental, and not just in the Republican period. Throughout the history of Rome, this structure is one of the great constructions of the city. And we can still see its imprint today. And we can still see its influence on subsequent imperial buildings throughout the city. In this long line of great Roman statesmen and great Roman generals, we conclude in the late Republican period with Julius Caesar. The beginning of his life in the Suburra wasn't so dramatic or impressive, but he is someone who builds up momentum with the passing of time and is ultimately successful in usurping power from his fellow Romans. He ends up defeating Pompey the Great and closes the door on the Republic forever. Well, what he leaves behind isn't just reforming the constitutional government. He is now Dictator Perpetuus. But what he's also doing is he's creating massive public works in Rome, both when he's there at the end of his life, also when he's still in Gaul, working through agents to recreate the city in his own image. And what he does is he has a lot of land bought up by his agents, including Cicero, around the Roman Forum that's now, in his opinion, too crowded. The courts are too crowded, there's not enough room for people to conduct business. He builds an adjoining forum area, which he calls Forum Iulium. It has a temple of his ancestress, Venus Genetrix, an equestrian statue of himself, of course, even a statue of his mistress at the time, Cleopatra. And it joins the back end side of the Curia, the Senate House of the Roman Forum. When we look at the plan of the Forum Iulium, we can see this rectilinear construction then hits at a right angle the back end of the Curia Iulia. So this is reconstructed under the time of Julius Caesar. It's going to be completed by Augustus. And it's through that juncture point that you have a real official linking from the Forum Magnum into the new space for forum activities created by Julius Caesar. He had many other plans for the city, many of which were never realized. Now he starts to dismantle an area for a theater, which is going to be modified and completed by Augustus. He planned a temple of Mars in the Campus Martius. Ultimately, it finds itself in the Forum of Augustus. And ultimately, he planned to reroute the Tiber River, a plan that never took place. Unlike any predecessor, Pompey the Great sets up a new standard with the creation of his massive theater complex in the Campus Martius, still largely a tabula rasa. Julius Caesar, though, takes it to another level and is really overreaching throughout the entire city. And he sets up a new standard to be followed through by Augustus, as he himself sets up for lasting effect a monarchy, the Principate, in which he truly does build throughout the city in multiple locations.